Epstein's property manager for Little St. Jeff was just arraigned in court yesterday for kidnapping charges, and we are just now finding out about it. This story is insane, y'all. So y'all remember Ann Rodriguez, the head BIC of the island? Well, apparently she is still living and working on the island, despite it having been sold to another billionaire and it's going to be turned into a resort. Y'all remember that? Ann Rodriguez was charged with kidnapping, assault, and destruction of property. This took place apparently all the way back on March 1st, and we're just hearing about it. You see, these two brothers, they rented jet skis and they went over to the island and they were filming some footage with their drone. They were making a documentary about it, but some inclement weather caused the drone to have to be grounded. Two men drove their jet skis closer to the island so that one of them could get out and swim to the beach in order to retrieve their drone. While leaving the island, a boat began aggressively pursuing them. The brothers ended up getting separated and one of the boats caught up to one of the brothers. Rodriguez apparently pointed a handgun at him and said, "I will unalive you," and ordered him to swim to her boat. The brother witnessed her making him kneel with his hands over his head. The brother, who was still on a jet ski, was close enough that he was able to film this and then sped away to go and get the police. And when the Coast Guard approached the boat, they found the brother naked, hogtied, and duct taped. Ann Rodriguez had apparently ruffled through the guy's duffel bag, found the memory cards from the drone, and threw them into the ocean. As it turns out, she was actually carrying a BB gun and not a real gun, but it had had the orange tip removed so that it would look like a real Glock 19. When the police searched the island, they found two more similar weapons. But Rodriguez herself identified herself as the property manager of the island still. Now, the million-dollar question is, why is she just now being arraigned for this in Superior Court? Oh, but this isn't the only incident she was in court for yesterday. That's right. Apparently, she was arrested for a second time this weekend, as in Saturday, for kidnapping another man. A man from Tennessee, Benjamin Jackson Owens, was apparently arrested for trespassing on the island on Saturday, claiming that he was taking photographs of the island for his nonprofit organization. He was caught by a maintenance worker. Oh, but here's where it gets wild, because when police arrived, they met not only Anne, but her daughter, Emery Polion, as well as her boyfriend, Paul Arnold III. Owen was apparently in the back, restrained with duct tape, and his face and body were bound, and he was wearing, once again, only black pants. Now, according to Anne and her daughter Emery, Polion is 5 months pregnant, and when the guy was trying to run away, he apparently pushed her as she was trying to take pictures of him, and she fell over and she hurt her side. Now, they're trying to say that they were just trying to do a citizen's arrest, but that's not how it works. A simple trespassing does not rise to the level in which they can legally detain him like that. There's an argument for it, but that argument doesn't hold water when you search them or rough them up. And yes, someone who has any clothing removed from their body against their will, I would consider a search or roughing up. But we're not done with the craziness of this story yet. So Paul J. Arnold III, who is apparently Anne's daughter's boyfriend, in front of the police officers as he is handcuffed on the ground, gets out of an all-terrain vehicle and punches the guy in the face in front of the cops. Like, directly in front of a detective who was photographing the guy. Now, 3 people altogether were arrested in relation to these events. Ann Rodriguez, the boyfriend, and I'm not sure who the third person is. Now, I'm doing some deep diving, so come back later for more on that. This story needs to be front effing page news, so make sure you do all the things that make that thing happen. And if you guys like my work, want me to keep doing it, please check out my bio. My dog's medicine is getting kind of low. The price of her monthly medication drastically jumped, unfortunately. But my mind is absolutely blown in this. I found her, y'all. I found Ann Rodriguez, Jeffrey Epstein's property manager for the island. And I have confirmed officially that this is her because I found this on her Facebook page. I know a picture of Epstein's Island when I see it, but don't worry, you don't have to take my word for it because you see this little bow right here? Y'all might remember this particular statue. Here she is, y'all. I hope your face is plastered everywhere after this, because some of y'all might remember that I reported yesterday that she has been charged with 2 different instances of kidnapping on Jeffrey's Island from the last 2 months. You can go ahead and watch the video that I posted yesterday for more information on that, but it is quite clear that this woman is still living in luxury on the island despite Jeffrey being dead. Because as you can see, in 2021, she and her dogs are apparently hanging out there still. And now, thanks to her arrest, I have been able to gather enough information to trace a family tree, which led me to a massive government web and a multi-generational operation that infiltrated all levels of the Virgin Islands government. it. Allegedly, but I'm just gonna lay out the information as I have found it. And it's so much information, I'm gonna have to do it in 2 videos for sure. Now, 2 of the people who were mentioned in the article about the kidnapping that took place on this last Saturday identify Anne Rodriguez and her daughter Emery Polian, as well as her daughter's boyfriend, Paul Arnold III. Now, seemingly, Emery is 5 months pregnant with Paul Arnold's baby. Now, there's a paper trail that Jeffrey has paid for all of the schooling since high school for the daughters Sierra and Emery. Now, they started out at a prep school in Florida, and the younger daughter, Sierra, exchanges a lot of messages with Jeffrey. Then, for some reason, the girls are sent to a different academy, and for some reason, the identity of the father is obscured. Weird. And Sierra seemed to have a little bit of struggles in school, but was grateful and thanked him profusely. She sends him Christmas gifts. Then she seems to start to do well in school. Then in March of 2018, Anne Rodriguez sends this terrifying and bone-chilling freaking email to Jeffrey saying, "I would rather you hear it from me than anyone else, smiley face. I've been really sick for the past 2 weeks. Found out on Tuesday I had an not living fetus inside of me, smiley face. But don't worry, it won't interfere with my work." But she talks about Cece, or Sierra, doing well in her school and thank you for everything you've done. And she signs it with XOXO. Then about a month later, something happens and Sierra sends this message profusely apologizing, saying, "I know you're mad at me. I'm so sorry. Don't give up on me." And then half an hour later, Jeffrey sends this message to Richard Kahn saying, "Reduce the allowance of the girls to $25 per week. They have behaved badly." And Sierra was CC'd on this message. Then in June, Sierra's sending Happy Father's Day to Jeffrey. And he's saying, "You've done really well." But then suddenly by August, they're sending her to a different school, eventually landing on one in Mississippi called Piney Woods. Now, something clearly happens to Sierra at school because January 17th, 2019, so she's only at the school for 1 semester at this point, she messages him saying, "Can I please come home? We have a break. Everybody else is going home. Please, Jeffrey." But then she says, "And I don't have no family to go home to. Please, Jeffrey." What? And he tells her, "I'm sorry, no, you need to learn to keep your promises to me and others." What the hell does that mean? I'm showing you this because 6 days later, again she writes, "Please, Jeffrey, I have never felt unsafe until today. I am going to die." Then she writes a second email saying, "Jeffrey, I'm so sorry I don't feel safe at this school. The school ain't doing nothing about it. Can I please come like soon?" The next morning, he writes, "You broke your agreement. You can leave if you want. If you do, I can no longer help you. Your choice." Now, that day that she said that she didn't feel safe, she got suspended from school. So Jeffrey knew about it. They were making arrangements and everything. So what is he talking about when you broke your agreement? You can leave if you want. He can't be talking about the school because she's suspended. She has to leave. Now, what we've seen is definitely years of psychological grooming with this girl. And it makes me wonder what the hell's going on with this school, because just in December, the COO of Piney Woods was actually murdered a week after someone accused him of being inappropriate with a student. So there's that. So it's not surprising that Emery Polian seems to be taking up some sort of mantle with her mother. Now, finding out that Anne's daughters had a different last name than her was a good clue, because then I started my search. And I thought I had something promising with this Anderson Polian, who was vice president of a training and security services on the Virgin Islands, even finding out that he was a police dog trainer, and in 2012 was arrested for embezzlement and extortion. But then I found out that his wife was named Beatrice, and so I was like, oh, dead end there. Eventually, I hit pay dirt with this obituary, Edison Constable, aka Big Sam. Boom, found the whole family tree with Emery and Sierra. Now, Big Sam, his life partner was Mary Polion, and her children were Jackson, Jeff, and Kim Lyons. But then we got down here to his daughter-in-laws, and no Anne. But then I thought maybe Anne is just going by an alias, until I found Monique Polian Rodriguez, who works at a family medical practice on the island. Then I found confirmation, you will be meeting with my brother-in-law, Jackson Polian, Weston St. John engineer supervisor. Oh look, Monique used to work at the Weston St. John. Then I was searching the files for more emails with Jackson in it, and found emails where not only Jackson was hired by Jeffrey to do work on the island, but Big Sam was hired to do the roads. That's right, Big Sam. Mind you, this is the same time that the girls' school is suddenly being paid for by Jeffrey. So then I started digging deeper, and another one of his stepchildren, Kim Lyons, in 2006 convinced the police commissioner, Elton Lewis, to hire her as his special assistant for St. John. Although she couldn't convince Lewis to hire her as a contractor when racial tensions began to escalate in the wake of an alleged rape of a black woman, Lyons then came on board in November as a staff member, wanting to improve communications between the police department and the community. She was an English and creative writing and art major. She then went on to serve as assistant commissioner of tourism. Then she started working with prisoners after she knew a murder victim and the accused, as well as their whole families. I haven't been able to track down what that is yet. But here's where it gets weird. She organized like a radio broadcast for Black History Month, which was a 1-hour radio show that featured readings of poetry and speeches by Black leaders, but it was only broadcast in Whitesburg, Kentucky and Virginia prisons. Whitesburg, Kentucky? I have been there. I went there for a case. Y'all remember Mickey Steins and Kevin Mullins? The sheriff who shot the judge? That place is being human trafficked, drug trafficked. That place is just a cross center of all the terrible things. Like it's a whole criminal enterprise that's been going on for decades and getting covered up. And that just happens to be the one place your broadcast goes out? By the way, Elton Lewis, the police commissioner? Oh, he wasn't just a police commissioner. He was director of National Guard, director of Homeland Security advisor, and apparently there was some controversy with him being appointed. But so many things are being scrubbed from the search engine, I'm having to go to alternative ones to find out this information. And while I have not been able to directly tie him to Big Sam, in his obituary, he talks about his cousins, Beulah Lewis and Arnold Lewis and family. And trust me, I've left a lot of stuff out of this. But here are the burning questions I'm left with. If Monique is the one who has married into the Polion family, then who's the father of her sister's children? And then this will bring us to Paul J. Arnold III. And boy, does it get wild from there. Paul Arnold II, very sparse information. All we know is that he ran for senator in 2014, but lost in dead last place. But Paul Arnold I? Pay dirt. Y'all remember the former governor of the islands, John DeJong? He was governor from 2007 to 2015. Then we found out that not only did his wife actually sit on the board of Jeffrey Epstein's foundation, but his wife helped secure visas for Epstein's trafficking scheme, as well as Epstein paying for his children's school tuition. You know, the way he did for Anne's children? Yeah, well, apparently the first time DeJong tried to run for governor, Paul Arnold Sr. was his running mate. The two ran as independents, coming in second to Charles Turnbull. DeJong would then go on to win the governor's race in 2006, and in 2007, Paul Arnold, who was apparently a board member of the Public Finance Authority, resigned from his position on that board because the governor gave him a job as projects coordinator with the Economic Development Authority. You know, the branch of position that gives tax exemption, gives out loans for businesses, gives out zoning permits. Oh, and helps with tourism. Now that sounds familiar. Oh yeah, Kim Lyons. She was assistant commissioner of tourism. Now in August of 2007, the Economic Development Authority is working on a building which will eventually house the local Department of Justice, which was being head up by Brian Turnbull, the authority's special projects coordinator. I wonder if he is any relation to the former governor, Charles Turnbull, because a month later, Brian Turnbull had to quit his position as the senior project coordinator because he was indicted by a federal grand jury for fraud. Oh, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. And seemingly Paul Arnold stepped right into the role that he left vacant. Now hold your breath, folks, while I really stick the landing on this deep dive. And if I impress you, support my work through the link in my bio so I can keep doing this work. Because in 2023, the former AG of the Virgin Islands, Denise George, filed a complaint with the FBI. In 2019, 2 weeks after she began her position as Attorney General underneath Albert Bryan Jr., the newest governor of the Virgin Islands, she was pressured into signing a waiver that Jeffrey Epstein wouldn't have to report to the government every 21 days, which apparently had been granted under Vincent Fraser, as well as Carol Thomas Jacobs, who were former AGs under previous governors. Jacobs apparently rescinded this order after Epstein was detained in the Dominican Republic, which, why is this the first time I'm hearing about that? Curious. And Epstein's lawyer, just days before his arrest, was making a meeting with George. Now I'm skipping through most of this, but pause if you want to read it yourself. But in this report, I found something very interesting. Turns out Governor Bryan had a chief of security who would be on speakerphone with him while he was talking to George. And that chief of security? Anderson Polion. Y'all remember him? Remember him from part 1? The former cop slash dog trainer? The dogs that were operating under the scrutiny of the federal government? And I wasn't originally going to include this in my video, but this was breaking news yesterday because Governor Albert Bryan Jr. just said that the government has reached an agreement with Southland Gaming to rebuild and operate a racetrack. Denise George said that Southland Gaming is being helped by the Virginia government because Jason Charles is part of Generation Now. Another member of Generation Now was John Engerman, who was the campaign manager for Bryan. And in 2018, we have confirmation that Epstein met with both Albert Bryan and his campaign manager, John Engelman. But Jason Charles wasn't just the director of public relations for Southland Gaming, because in 2007, he served as chief application investigator for the Economic Development Authority under Dijon, which was the same year that Paul Arnold started working for it. Now, Anderson Polian, I went and I looked further into his case, and it turns out that he was arrested in July 2012 and fired from the police department for embezzlement and extortion, as well as removing a vehicle that was in custody without authorization that was involved in a vehicular homicide. But then, lo and behold, the Attorney General's office declined to prosecute the case, which led to he and his wife suing the government. His wife, Beatrice Polian, who is a post administrator. Polian claimed that he was being targeted. He had permission because he wanted to buy a vehicle. I don't know. It's stupid. It's weird. I don't believe it. But it was eventually dismissed in 2018. And in 2022, Bryan fired Denise George 4 days after filing a lawsuit against JP Morgan for their part in trafficking. Carol Thomas Jacobs then took over all of the lawsuits for the Virgin Islands Jeffrey Epstein stuff and gave Leon Black immunity from further prosecution for any of his crimes, and then was immediately appointed the judge on the Superior Court by Governor Bryan. Oh, and did I mention that Albert Bryan was actually the commissioner of the Department of Labor under Dijon? Oh, but I'm not done with you yet, Anderson, because I saw your name pop up again in 2022. Because for some reason, you were suddenly appointed Director of Compliance Management and Environmental Enforcement, which is a position usually associated with someone with a science background. And in this complaint filed by a former employee who was demoted and had to work underneath you, after she had the nerve to make sure that it was safe to dump the things that you were wanting to dump, and Anderson Polian went ahead and issued the permit to dispose the site at the landfill before it was determined whether the soil was actually contaminated or not. And a week after she complained, she was accused of restricting operations and was placed on administrative leave. And just in 2024, this press release for the Homeland Security, Justice, and Public Safety Committee represented Anderson Polian as the director of the Environmental Enforcement Division of the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority, where they flat out admit that there are no officers or inspectors on St. John, and was requesting 6 marked utility vehicles for patrolling, equipped with cameras, because dumping happens in dense bushy areas where their current vehicles can't travel. Y'all remember that recording we heard about the boat and Anne getting upset about the crash? You know, the audio recording that was in the files?
With this shit. Look at the boat. Look at the man's boat. This is bullshit.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
You the head electrician. You like one of the head landscapers. I finally got you a gig as a boat captain, and this is the bullshit I'm dealing with. This is bullshit. All y'all know better than this shit. This is just completely, this makes absolutely no sense. No sense.
I told both of these guys, I said, you want these stairs, you wait for the morning. And then all of a sudden...
But that was the plan, to kill them, wait till daylight, and then we dispose of them properly. And then I get these calls and this bullshit happened.
Things are making a little more sense now, aren't they?